Everyone. How's everybody doing today? Welcome to my photo chat that I do normally on Sundays mornings for me. But wherever you are, welcome. I'm always happy to see everyone here and catch up on what's new. And I do my best to answer any questions you might have about photography in general. But of course, my camera of choice or system of choice is Olympus OM systems. And yeah, it's been a busy week for me. I've been I had a couple of photo jobs and video jobs this week, and this is really, I think, maybe not the first video job I've done completely with my OM1 system or the Olympus OM-1. It, but it did a great job, and I was very very happy with the results. I'd share it with you, but I'm under a non-disclosure type agreement with the broker. So it's a property video, but I can't show it to you unfortunately because it's a private sale. Otherwise, I'd love to show it to you. I think they came out really really well, and you know the video performance. Now that it has the 420 10-bit color, it really makes a difference over. Um, and I'm talking about internally. Of course, externally we can do 422 10-bit, but internally being able to do that now instead of the previous 420 8-bit, you can see a difference. There's a little bit less banding, and with that, you actually pick up a little more dynamic range. At least you perceive a little more dynamic range in the image because you can see more colors. And I'm getting better at working at color spaces and stuff in DaVinci Resolve. So the grading is pretty good. I'm still struggling with the official OM1 LUT for the OM log 400. So there's a conflict there in the color space. I think that I'm missing somewhere in the chain, right? Because working with color is can be tricky when you got cameras that work in one color space, your computer works in a different color space, and then you have software like DaVinci Resolve that has its own color space and settings, and then trying to get all that to sync and match is tricky. I mean, it's probably very straightforward, and there's a chain of a chain of settings that will all work together just fine. I'm just not quite there yet. So what I've been doing is just ignoring the OM400 LUT and just grading it myself. And it's easy enough. You just adjust a little saturation and contrast, just like editing photos. It's not a big deal. And then applying that, because every scene, when I do this particular property was a standalone building, so there was a lot of windows, and I had a lot of light coming in one side and then artificial lighting inside, and the inside lighting was much darker than, of course, the outside that day because it was a bright sunny day. But overall, it came out really well, and I attribute a lot of that to the newer codecs and sensor and everything that's in the OM1. There's definitely improvement over the EM1 Mark III, which was my previous workhorse. And it's close enough to the Panasonic S5 in terms of video specs that I don't need to bring the S5 anymore. The output quality from the OM1 is good enough for what I deliver. It's not as good as the S5. Clearly, the S5 is an amazing video camera, and but it has a few drawbacks over the OM1. Namely, the image stabilization is not as good, and it doesn't have 4K 60 without crop. So I have to use a super wide angle lens, and those are a little bit heavy, and it just and the system itself is heavier on the gimbals, so I don't get quite as smooth a gimbal action. I have to use my larger gimbals for it. I do have a smaller gimbal now, and the OM5 is perfect. So with the smaller gimbals, you're less top heavy. more stabilization and things like that. But anyway, I know a lot of people don't care about video, but I thought I'd share that was really the new experience. I mean, the photo quality is pretty much the same for the way I shoot when I was doing these jobs. It doesn't matter the high ISO performance because I shoot at base ISO pretty much, or I never go over ISO 800 when I'm on a photo job. Not because I'm trying to avoid higher ISOs, but mostly because I just don't need to go higher than that for anything that I do on a job, and I do commercial real estate properties because usually I bring my own light or they have enough light going on anyway. The only reason I have to go to ISO 800 is because sometimes my flash power is not quite enough to reach, the darker areas of the room. So I increase the ISO to bring in more ambient light, and then just the flash becomes more of a supplement. And then, I merge and layer these images back together in Photoshop to get a more balanced image. And so it comes out well. It comes out well overall. I mean, processing has been playing a much bigger role in my photography this year in particular than it ever has been, because over the years, I was primarily we'll just call it a JPEG shooter for my photo walks and all my other photography, other than actually paid work, stuff that I do for the channel. And if I had to tweak anything, with the raw image or the JPEG, it was very, very minor, and I was very, very content. But the software has come such a long way in the last couple of years. Particularly I use the DxO photo suite with Photolab 6 now, and Nik Collection, and they have a new perspective viewpoint 5 or 4, whatever version it is. I'm going to try and do some videos and tutorials on those this week. But it really has just allowed me to be a little bit more flexible when I'm taking the picture. And some people like to shoot raw only, and pretty much, my photo jobs, my paid work, I only need to shoot in raw because I'm going to be layering and processing the heck out of them anyway. But for my personal stuff, I still do photo raw plus JPEG. And the JPEG, I usually set it to how I think I might process the raw. So if I'm going to be processing images in black and white, I'll set the camera JPEG to black and white and various other settings so that I can see how it looks when I'm in the field on the camera while I'm there. Because, a lot of times, if I shoot in raw only, for me, I can't, it's a relatively flat image, right? And, we see on our Olympus cameras anyway, what we see is the whatever profile we have set, but that JPEG is not saved to the camera. And, so for example, I'm shooting in raw plus JPEG. I set the JPEG for black and white. And I take a picture, I can see right away how the black and white looks. And then I can make adjustments, either add a red filter or add grain or vignetting, whatever it is that I want to add to it, adjust the tone curves, all the things you can do with a JPEG image in camera. And if the exposure is not giving me what I want based on the JPEG, I can make adjustments right there in the field. And then when I go back to edit the image, half the time the JPEG's good enough, and I can just, I'll be happy with that. But a lot of times I like to process it too, and I'll process it back to what I liked about the JPEG, and then take it from there and go further. So that's been my process lately, because I have been processing more with software than I ever have been before. And I get comments, or I see comments about, JPEGs are good enough, you know, and some people are JPEG only shooters and they're perfectly fine with that, particularly Fuji, you know, with all the film simulations they have. A lot of people like just the straight out of camera JPEGs that they get. And like I said, a lot of times I'm pretty content with the JPEG image.
Sorry, I'm having trouble understanding right now. Please try a little.
Alexa, stop. I gotta take that Alexa out of my room here. But what was I talking about? I can't even remember now. I tell you, my brain is just you know, you kind of get on a roll when you're talking about something, and then you get distracted, and then you can't go back to what you were talking. I was talking about JPEGs. I was saying, oh yeah, I was saying that JPEGs. I'm pretty content a lot of times with half the JPEGs, and I'll just use those. But I find myself wanting to process it more, and I'll show you a few examples. I didn't set them up right for the stream, but you know, I'll do my best to show you the raw output versus my JPEG edit, and what the camera showed me in camera. Because the last couple of weeks I've had, you know, when I go out with the photo club, I try to help people with their camera settings or how to compose the scene, or, you know, I do my best, right? I mean, I'm not a master photographer or anything, but the image, you know, I like the images that I take, and I try to give some pointers to others to how they can compose or see the light. And I'll show you an example I did, and I got her permission to share the images, and some of you have probably seen it already if you've been on my Flickr and Instagram. But let me pull up yesterday's stuff, and this was in Fort Washington Park, which is an old fort that they built on the Potomac to protect. Okay, let me. And I shot with my Pen F yesterday. It's taking a minute to load because I slow my computer down for the streams. I put it on like silent mode so it's quiet as possible. Here they are. Can I bring this down into the other window? Okay, now see if I can show the window. Of course not. One second. Is it this one? Yeah. Okay, so basically all I did is I just held the camera out at arm's length, and flip the screen around and I was using the 25 mm lens, so at arm's length, this is the shot I got, and this is the raw image, I believe, yeah. And there's nothing. So what I was doing was there was this light coming through one of the windows. Let me show you how it looks. There was light coming through this natural light coming through this window, and I sat right about here. And what I was doing was I was telling people that I was telling this young lady that that when you when you want to do a portrait and you want to take a nice picture and all you have is this natural light coming through the window, you need to position the person first, right? Coming in the natural light, and then have them face the light or have them face away from the light, then turn their nose into the light until you start to see a little bit on the left side. So if the light's hitting the right side of their face, like it was in this case, you turn their head until you just see a little bit starting to hit the cheekbone over here on the left side. And everybody's face is a little bit different. So that's what I did here is I was demonstrating to her, this is how I would do it. And it's a little overexposed because I was letting the camera take care of the exposure. So because of all this dark area back here and just a little bit of light coming through the front. And then pretty quickly, let's see, and then I edit this. Oh, this is what is this? This is my edit that I did. Just a quick edit. To bring the exposure back down, right, on myself. And then this is what I posted to Instagram as I cropped it to square. And I did a little more processing, a little sharpness to make it a little bit gritty. And this is what I came up with, right? And I think this is just a different version. Oh, in this version, I just added a little bit of tint of blue and sepia, right? Just to give it a little bit more depth and color, because this is the pure black and white, right? And then here I just added a little bit of blue into the highlights and sepia into the shadows. That's just me experimenting and trying to be creative. I don't know. Didn't make much difference, but it's very subtle. So here's the next image. And this is is this the JPEG? Let me see. Yeah, this is the straight out of camera JPEG. So I just took a quick shot and I had her sit down in the same spot and I told her, face me. So she was facing me straight. And I said, okay, now turn your head towards the light slowly. And then I waited until I saw a little bit of light come over here on her left cheek. And I said, okay, stop. Let me see if I can command to get full screen. Oh. And let me see, what were my settings? Anything special here? Yeah, I dialed in a -1 EV because I could tell from my initial shot of myself that I was getting overexposed, right? In the face, the highlights were getting blown out. So I just dialed in a -1 EV, told her to turn her head, and then bang, I got this shot. And this is the straight out of camera JPEG, right? And I thought that, all right, how come? Oh, I got to learn the shortcut keys. But this is the straight out of camera JPEG. And I thought this came out really nice. The highlights are still a little bit hot, but that's mostly because I had the tone curves and everything, kind of out of whack for this kind of image. I didn't want to, I just couldn't spend that because I was getting pulled in all different directions that day, talking to people about different things. But in this case, I thought this came out really, really nice, just straight out of camera. But I wanted to bring in a little bit more of the background instead of just being sort of just a just the silhouette of her, standing out in the shadows. So here's the, I think this is the raw image. Let me reset this. So here's the raw image, right? Oh, come on. Shortcuts are all different. So here's the raw image in color, which is also pretty nice. But you can see I have a lot of room to work here, right? The highlights are not blown at all, and there's a little bit of background. And I didn't pose her hands and arms the right way. I was just focused on the face, unfortunately. But if I was paying attention, I would have told her to bend her arms a little bit differently and stuff. And then this is the final edit image. Well, shit. This one, I was messing around with it. But this is the final edit image. Come on, full screen. And this is what I came up with. So you can see it's very, very close to the original JPEG image, except all I really did here was just bring out more of the background, get some texture in the background, and just double check the highlights to make sure they weren't clipped. Because if you zoom in, you can see that, really none of the highlights are clipped. So it's a nice strong portrait. I think maybe a square crop would have been better because I really don't like the way her hands are sitting here. But this came out really nice, I think. Just for a quick shot. I did this like in 1 minute between taking my picture and her picture. Sometimes you get lucky, right? And that was it. So there's the raw. There's the JPEG that gave me an idea of how I want to edit the photo when I get the raw image. Because if I try to edit this raw the JPEG, obviously, it's not going to be quite as flexible, right? I assume you guys all know that. But I could edit the JPEG, but you can see there's noise in the image because I think I had grain turned on in the camera with the Pen F. So there's noise here that is in the JPEG that's been added in camera in addition to whatever noise you might get at, what was I at, ISO 800. So when we go to the, the finished raw image, you can see it's very clean, right? and that's what I mean about software doing a lot of the work these days. I'm just wondering how this would look as a square crop. Where's all my tools at? There's the perspective. I'll just pull it out. There it is. I'll just pull it from there. We just do a square crop. Maybe a little tighter, but anyhow, because now I've cut off her arms. Something like that. That's perfect. Okay. Well, almost perfect. A little bit over to the right. So there's a square. I don't know. Anyhow, let me not waste any more time on this. You know how when you start editing, just time flies, right? So that's an example of my workflow when I'm in the field and then to when I get home. I look at the JPEG, I process the raw, and I was able to get to exactly what I wanted very quickly because I saw what I wanted in the field. Because I know there's people that can just shoot raw and then come home and edit because they can visualize in their head what they want. But at the same time, I think there's people that might rely too much on the software, and they start to push and pull images to the detriment of the overall quality of the image, and not really getting the best out of the raw image to begin with, not starting with a good foundation. So seeing the JPEG in the field gives me a very good foundation with the raw image in terms of exposure and everything else, because I know I'll have a lot more latitude with the raw image when I get it, when I go back to edit it. Because as you know, we're just seeing JPEG images in the camera anyway. And then when we publish them for Instagram or whatever, we publish JPEGs. So it's important to start with a good exposure with the raw image, whatever that exposure is. Because technically there's no correct exposure, right? The exposure is what you want. You create the exposure that you want, whether you want very low key or high key, or you want something perfectly balanced. There's all different ways to talk about exposure and how you want to make something creatively. But for me, this is my process, and this is what's been working for me this year, because I am processing a lot more than I ever have. Because like I said, software has just gotten really good, and that's where I'm at. So let me check into the chat section here, see who's here. See Serge and Jonas and Peter and Druid. Good to see everyone. John Truman, hi. And JS, good. David, oh, hey, David. Yeah, it was fun at Fort Washington. I didn't take many pictures myself that I wanted to take. I just, it was a little hectic, but that's fun for me too, right? Is helping other people while I'm in the field. I'd like to get some nice pictures, but at the same time, photography for me is about the total experience, right? Of being out there in the field and being with other people, and fortunately, I can help a lot of people while I'm there. And you meet lots of interesting people. There was a new member there that had a really interesting background. They were a news photographer or cameraman, so they did video and photography, primarily video. And he's traveled around the world and did all kinds of things. So it was interesting to hear his stories and adventures, and his perspective on photography from coming from such a strong professional video type background. But he said a lot of the things are the same when you're talking about capturing images. The biggest difference with video is, of course, you're working with time and motion. But in terms of exposure and things like that, it's not that much different. You want to get the right exposure, basically. But with video, you have to tell the story differently, right? With motion, because things change from one scene to the next, and they all have to have this cohesive story, which a lot of that's done in editing. But it's very interesting to hear his perspective. And he is also an Olympus OM-1 system shooter. He had basically the same setup I did, Olympus OM-1 with a 300 millimeter f4. And while we were there, 2 bald eagles showed up, and he got terrific pictures of them. And I'm sitting there with a Pen F and a 40-150 kit lens, and that thing, that was a train wreck. That would not focus at all. I didn't get any good bald eagle shots, but he got some good ones. And he did some really interesting abstract photography as well. I'll have to send him a text or message and tell him how much I really like those images. Unless you're here now, I really like those architectural images you did. They're very abstract. They were really good. Maybe I can show them to you. See if I can pull that up without crashing the system. Yeah, I can do that. It was, here's another picture I took. Nothing special. These are mine. Someone did a picture of me. Another picture. That's mine. That's mine. That's mine. Where the heck is it? Oh, I'm in the wrong group. These are this is my group here. Yeah. Check this out. This is really nice, I think. Can we see a full screen? No. Supposedly they improved the photo part of this thing. I like this one a lot. I just like the way the lines are meeting and crossing, and the colors, the mix of colors. It was really good. I was really impressed with this photo. And let's see. This is a good mix of color, good color contrast here between the yellow and blue, of course. See if there was anything else. Oh, these are the eagle shots. This is a great shot. I like this juxtaposition of the plane and the bird. This is a turkey vulture. I tried to do the same thing, but I didn't have anywhere near the reach. I just had my when this was happening, I just had my 25 millimeter lens on. So my shot, you just see a couple of dots in the sky, and one's a bird, one's a plane, one's the moon, one's a tree. It would have been a great shot if I had a telephoto lens, but luckily he was able to capture it. And there's the eagle shot. That was pretty amazing. You know, this is the OM-1 with a 300 millimeter f4, and it just makes things so easy to do bird photography. And that picture's not coming up. But anyhow, it was great. It was great fun for everyone, I think. And so I wish all of you could go on photo walks with me and the group, because it's a great group here locally with me. And we always go out to breakfast afterwards. Usually, not everyone can make it, but that's where you start to hear the stories and backgrounds of people. And one of the interesting things came up. the one member was like, she was watching something, I can't remember, something on YouTube. They asked, what was one thing that was what is the best advice you ever got in photography, you know? And they asked like a dozen different high profile photographers what was their best advice. And of course, I can't remember anything she said now, the best advice. But there are things that just stick with you, right? When somebody tells you something, and that stays with you forever, I guess, in your photography, and influences your photography going forward. And when I was starting out, I think it was Walter. Walter was probably had the biggest influence on my current photography. I can't remember anything specifically that he said, but you know, I did go to him a lot. Walter Rowe. I did go to him a lot for advice and how to do things with a camera. Because before that, before 2012 or 2013, I just shot with a point and shoot, and that was rare. There's a huge gap. In college, I got into photography a bit, but I was shooting in full auto even back then. And, with a film camera, they had the OM2. I shot with the OM2S spot meter version, but it had its own metering, so I didn't even have to think about aperture and all of that stuff. I just shot in auto mode with my OM2 film camera. And I shortly upgraded to, I use that term loosely, to a Minolta Maxim, which had autofocus. I think it was the first autofocus DSLR. So I was a total full auto guy back then. But if you guys have any advice, or if you remember what influenced your photography, something somebody said to you, some advice, share it in the comments below after the stream, or you can share it now in the chat section if you're here now. But I think I'd be very interested to read your story and what advice you've gotten in photography that has helped you the most, or has influenced you. So like I said, either after the stream, if you're watching later, you can leave it in the comments, or you can leave it now in the chat section. Okay, let me see if I missed any questions. If anyone has any questions, this is a good time. That's all I really wanted to talk about. That's all that's happened this week, is I had a couple of photo video jobs, and I did a photo walk yesterday. And the photo editing or video editing took up most of my time. I got a little bit rusty. Yeah, this is a good one. If your photos aren't good enough, then you aren't close enough. And that's advice I give a lot myself, is to just fill the frame with the subject, and you'll have a fine picture. And it certainly applies to let me see if I can find that photo I was trying to do with the bird and the plane and the moon. I took some god-awful images yesterday. Just bad. I'll show you my texture image. This was so bad. This image here, I was trying to do some texture stuff too. Oh my God, look how terrible that is. I mean, I took one shot, and then you can see from there, I just gave up. After I took one picture, I said, you know what? I'm not feeling it today. I am not going to get a good texture shot today. I tried to do some high-res shot, long exposure stuff here. I ended up with one composition I liked. And this is how bad, oh my God, the Pen F cannot focus at all. Look how bad that is. When the bald eagle came, I had the 40 to 150. I'm at 150. I dialed in a +1.3 exposure comp. Anyway, Pen F is not a birding. Oh, here it is. So here's the shot, right? There's a plane up here. There's the moon. There's the eagle. And then a tree down here. It would have been nice to compress this down to these three elements. But I just, what was I at, 78 millimeters? I just didn't have enough focal length. But this would have been a cool shot if I had my 300 millimeter f4, because I'm cropped in easily to 300 millimeters here, if not more. This would have been a cool shot because I got the plane, the moon, and an eagle. But it didn't work out. Yep, Play-Doh. Keep it simple. Yep. Yeah, Valdez, you need to go on the Flickr. Flickr's the best platform for sharing images because, if you upload full res images, of course you can pixel peep the heck out of them. If you're looking for specific details, and by pixel peeping, we're not always looking for sharpness, right, or noise or anything like that. Sometimes we want to see, you know, the finer details of things that are in the image to kind of spark some other ideas. Like if I were to take that picture, what would I have done differently? And when I can see more detail and crop in and not get distracted by pixelation, because if you upload these very small images, it's hard to crop in or zoom in and see different compositions. But anyhow, and I try to upload all my images with the EXIF data in there so you can see that as well. And then John says, my first bit of advice from a friend and photographer was to understand and have confidence in your camera and know its limitations. Yep. Definitely learn the limitations of your camera. And in turn, your own personal limitations, right? What are you capable of doing with your camera? Because cameras can do so many things. And so learning what the limitations are based on what you know how to use, but you need to expand your skill set so that you can take advantage of things in the camera so you can do even more with it, right? David says, if you think you're close, get closer. Yep. Some of the shots you don't feel like you're happy with make good computer wallpapers. Yeah. I'm not into wallpapers. I just like clean black screen. So I can find what I want quickly. I get easily distracted. And John Yutsey's here, in and out. Yeah, and sometimes images need some breathing room. Absolutely. You need a little bit of space around your subject a lot of times. And that goes back to what kind of image or story or mood are you trying to convey? Because if you crop in, too tight and don't give enough breathing room, it can feel a little bit confining and restrictive and claustrophobic in one way. In another way, it can make it feel more powerful and more important. And God, my I need to get a thesaurus or something so I can expand my vocabulary. But you can make things more powerful, the image more powerful by filling the frame, or you can make things more claustrophobic and feel tight and in a closed space. And when you give things more breathing room, if you give just the right amount, you can still maintain that very powerful presence while still giving the image a little bit room to breathe, in the sense that you can see the environment and you don't feel like the person's cramped in or the subject is cramped in. And if you go really wide, right, then it's more of an environmental type photo where you can see the surroundings and the kind of environment that the subject's in. So is it a cloudy day? Like if you're doing a landscape, it's very wide typically, right? So is it a cloudy day? Is it a sunny day? Are there other things happening? Like when I did a Photoshop of a plane flying overhead, I included the environment below on the ground, so you can see that kids are playing down in the field while a plane is flying overhead, thereby telling a little bit more story about the location. And so is the story about the kids playing with planes flying overhead, or is it a plane flying overhead with the kids? It's open to interpretation. But tell your story, right, the way you want to tell it, and the way you frame things, whether you allow more room, more space, more negative space, or you include more environmental type things. Negative space being, just black and white, very low detail, whether it's blurred out or it's underexposed or overexposed. Negative space is basically negative, meaning there's no information there to distract from the subject, versus environmental photos have more information that support the subject, right? So if you have a if you have, say, a flower in a pot, and you want to use negative space, maybe you have just a white background and just a flower in the pot. Or if you want to have more of an environmental photo, maybe it's the flower in a pot at a, what do you call those things? An arboretum or something, right? Where it's just one of many telling a story. And maybe this particular flower is purple, but all the other flowers are yellow, right? So now you're giving that flower context and singling it out that way while including the environment, not necessarily negative space, right? So, and then, yeah, know your camera, definitely. That's why I love the Pen F. It has so many features in it for JPEG, and that's why a lot of times I can get pretty much a good enough image straight out of camera with a Pen F. Like the image I just showed with the young lady. Um, I just dialed in the monochrome profile number 2 and took a picture. And if I'd spent a little more time, right, if I took a few more pictures and made some adjustments, I could have probably got exactly what I wanted out of the Pen F and not had to process at all. But I can work a lot faster in the field now if I can get really close with the JPEG. And then I spend more time at home in post processing, but then I think I get better results that way. And Randy's here. Good to see you. And you miss all the shots you ever take. I don't get that. Oh, you miss all the shots you never take. Okay, I got it. Yes. And Casper's here. Good to see you. And here's some advice from John's dad or father, who is a photojournalist. Tough job. My photos are sharp because I never shoot anything that moves. That was in the 1950s, though. That's funny. Sometimes photos don't stand on their own as well as when in a group. Abandoned schoolhouse, for example, an overview from distance, and a group of closer photos like a doorknob. Yeah, if you want to do a photo, what do they call it? When you put 3-5 photos together, I forget what that's called. But yeah, you can tell the story through a group of photos, right? And rather than just one. And maybe put them all together into a single photo, so you have 5 or 6 photos. I do that sometimes, not very often. Usually when I go out, I have in mind to get one epic photo, or one style of photo throughout a series. Whenever I go out, honestly, I'm always trying to push myself to do something new and interesting, something that I haven't done before. And then when I find something I kind of like I talked about a couple of weeks ago with the street photography, I try to fine tune that and improve on that. But when I go to a different location, like when I went to Fort Washington yesterday, it's not really a place for street photography, right? Because we're at a historic site, a fortress. So I was going to try to look for shapes and textures and forms that I could do in black and white. and I just totally failed. And then I started working with other people and helping them with their stuff. So I didn't really get to take a lot of my own photos. Uh, but yeah, definitely whatever that is when you put 5 or 6, if somebody could put in the chat section what that is. I don't know why that escapes me now. It's because I don't do it very often. But there's a word for it, a term for it. I know like some people call it a trifecta where you have just 3 images. But when you put 5 to 10 images together, it's a photo package. I think that's what they call it. Put together a photo package, which is typical in photojournalism, right? Because you would have 5 to 10 images to tell the story that somebody would write. So you have the writer, right, writing the story, and then the photographer provides 5 to 10 images to help tell that story. So they would submit a photo package to the reporter to use in their story. I think that's right. I mean, I was never a photojournalist, but I think that's the way it worked. And then higher is, maybe this is a question. If you use exposure compensate A or S mode, so aperture priority or shutter priority, then switch to manual mode, the exposure comp is still there, and I can only rid of it by switching back to A mode and turning it off, then go back to M. Depends on your camera. In the Pen F, there's a physical exposure compensation dial that is, it's there. It's a physical dial, as well as some Fujis. The way you ask the question or present it implies that you're using like an EM10 or an OM-1 or a regular camera without a dedicated exposure comp dial. I don't know why you can't switch it. So typically when you go to manual mode, the dials are reassigned to aperture and shutter, right? So when you're in aperture priority mode, the front dial might be aperture. To change the aperture, the rear dial will be, let me just grab a camera so it's easier to see. So typically, right, you're in aperture priority mode, so the front dial will be aperture, the rear dial will be aperture, front dial will be exposure comp, right? And then shutter priority is the same, right? The rear dial becomes shutter mode or shutter speed. The front dial is still exposure comp. And then when you switch to manual mode, that exposure compensation carries over if you're in auto ISO mode. But the front and rear dials become shutter speed and aperture, and your exposure comp dial is gone. So there's a couple of ways to get to it. I wonder if I can, is there a battery in here? Let me put a battery in, I'll show you. And I'm just assuming you have an Olympus camera. Let me plug this in. Hopefully everything works. My dying eyes, I can't see. All right, come on. There it is. All right, so I'm in aperture priority, as you can see, right? And if I go in the shutter priority, you can see I'm at +2 exposure comp, right? Aperture priority, shutter priority, and then you go into manual mode, and I need to be in auto ISO. Okay, so you see the +2 at the bottom? Oops, let me close this window. So it says +2, right? So manual mode, I'm still at +2. So how do you change it? Well, let me see. I used to have it on the mode dial. Okay. All right. Give me a second while I refresh my memory a bit. There's also in the B menu or button menu, bear with me. I need to just refresh dial function. Okay, so you can also change it here. So you can see in aperture priority mode, the front dial or the rear dial is aperture, the front dial is exposure comp, right? And then in shutter priority, it switches to shutter, then the front dial becomes aperture. But when you go into manual mode or bulb mode, the rear dial becomes shutter mode, the front dial becomes the F number or aperture. And I'm going to assume now if you have an EM5, you have this switch. You see where it says, I can click the info button and switch how the dials operate. Okay, I'm getting there. I'm just trying to explore all the different ways you can do it. All right. So you can see in manual mode, clearly I can change the aperture, and I'm going to show you how to do it that way. And then I'm going to show you how to do it using the dials. So since I'm in the menu, you go into the button menu, go into dial function, go down here to manual mode, and you can change how these operate. I can change this back to be exposure compensation, the rear dial, or I can change the front dial to be exposure comp. And if you have, so now the front dial is exposure comp, right? So now you can see that the exposure comp is yellow again. And if I rotate the front dial, things change here. But let's say, you generally need aperture number unless you're using a manual lens where you can control the aperture manually, because sometimes you do that, right? Okay, let me go back and show you the other. All right, so basically that's the story, right? Is you have to go into the button menu, do dial function, and you can reassign the dial to become exposure compensation. But I would only do that if you're using a manual lens that has the aperture built in, right, onto the lens. And you can change the aperture this way, and then you can just use the dial for exposure comp. But if you're using like a kit lens or a lot of lenses that don't have the physical aperture dial on it, the only way you're going to control the aperture in manual mode is through the dial. And if you have an EM5 with a lever switch, you can program it so that when you switch the lever to position 2, the front dial can be exposure comp or whatever you program it to through the dial function menu. And that's one way to do it. Now, if you have an EM10, you don't have this button. So what you have to do is program one of the function buttons to be exposure compensation. And then when you push and hold the button, you can rotate the dial. Well, you don't push and hold it. Hold on. I don't have an EM10 handy to show you, but because I'm using it for the stream. Is it this one? Where is it? There it is. What you have to do is go into the button menu, button function, And on an EM10, it's not going to say ISO button. It'll say like F1 or F2. But you can go into the button function menu and just change it to be the exposure compensation button right here. And now when I push it, oh, I don't have a lens on the camera. Hold on. Button function. Yeah, you have to push and hold the button and then rotate the front dial, and that will change the exposure compensation that way. So I programmed like this button here. Like on an EM10, it'll say F1 or F2, but you push and hold it, then you rotate the dial, and that will allow you to change the exposure compensation that way. So there's multiple ways to do it when you're in manual mode. So through the menu with the dial function setting. Also, you can do it through the lever button if you have an EM5 with a lever, or an EM1 for that matter. And then also you can do it by programming a button to be the exposure compensation, but you have to push and hold it and rotate the dial, and then you can do it. All right. So hopefully that helps. And when you photograph people in color, you photograph their clothes, but when you photograph people in black and white, you photograph their souls. Wow. Wow. That's deep. Ted Grant, huh? Archikins is here. Good to see you. I'm doing well. Thank you. I hope you're doing well. Picture collage. Yes. That's another word for it. That's I think a more casual word, calling it a collage, but it's certainly means the same thing as a package. I guess a package is a more professional term, right? Because that's something you would deliver, whereas a collage is more artistic and doesn't have a commercial sort of connotation. Collage, thank you, Sam. Yep. Photo essay. That's the other term for it, right? So package is more of a commercial term. Photo essay is a little bit more professional, I guess. And it's probably on the same level as collage. Collage gives more of an artistic connotation. For me, anyway, that's the way I think of those different terms. And any suggestions to make food shots more appealing? Mine only gets less than 10 likes on Instagram. I guess it's all relative. 10 likes versus 100 likes. I don't know. I mean, make food shots more appealing. I guess I'm not a food photographer, so I can't give you any specific advice. There is a guy on YouTube though that is a professional food photographer. I think it's called Tin Studios. Let me look him up. That would be the best place to go. Tin Studio. Tin House Studio. I think that's the guy. Yeah, this guy. This guy, Tin House Studios, he's a professional food photographer. And I guarantee he'll have some good advice. I mean, he gives a lot of general photography advice as well, but he does talk about food photography a lot because that's his profession. And he had an excellent video. Let me see if it's something recent or if it's something I saw a long time ago. You can see all these red bars. I watched a lot of his stuff. maybe this video here would help you. But anyhow, definitely check out his channel for food photography, because he does it for a living, and that would be the best place. Okay. I wish I could give you advice on that. I don't know. I mean, the key to photography in general is good lighting, right? And so if you need help with lighting and things, I could probably give you some advice. I would imagine soft lighting would work well with hints of highlights and reflections for food, but a lot of times when I did a couple of food shots where I actually tried to make things look interesting, is I took a picture of a plate with eggs and toast, but I put a picture of the knife and cutting board behind. You know, it's more of an environmental shot of how I prepared the meal that's on the plate. And then I did a couple of shots like that. And then I did a shot where I used a fork to pick up, like, to cut through some of the food and present it as if you're about to take a bite yourself. God, I'm making myself hungry now. So I wish I could find those shots that I took, and I could just show them to you what I did. Let me do a quick gander. Let me do a quick gander and see if I can find them. If I can't find them in 2 seconds, let me just do a quick look. If it's not in this folder, it's not going to be easy to find. Yeah, it's not here. One other place I can look. While that pulls up, I'll talk about some other stuff. Oh, you're going, okay, David's going to a portrait meetup. Cool. He invited me to that, but you have to pay. I don't have that kind of money. You know, I mean, I have to be very, very specific with how I spend my money. You know, going to a paid portrait shoot is kind of a splurge for me. And I don't have the Panalika because I have the 8mm fisheye from Olympus, which, you know, Olympus cameras have built-in distortion correction, so it's effectively an 8mm f1.8. So I don't have a need for that lens, but I've only heard good things about it. I don't know what this is referring to. The latest OS page 234, you can set RGB and transparency of the AF target. I have to look into that. I don't know what that is in reference to, but if somebody asked that question, that's the answer. Oh, you're welcome, Hire. I'm always happy to help. In the streams, you know, if somebody asks me questions, that's where a lot of times the stream, that's where I spend most of my time, because I have to jog my memory a little bit, because everybody shoots differently, right? So I rarely use exposure comp in manual, because when I'm in manual mode, I control ISO, shutter speed, aperture. I control the exposure variables directly, and I don't need to use exposure comp. But there is some merit to having auto ISO in full manual mode, because you do want, you know, you don't need the control. You want the camera to take care of some of the exposure part, but you just want control over shutter and depth of field, right? Shutter speed and depth of field. Yes, Photos, good to see you. It has been a while, hasn't it? Let's see. Fuji is easier with EV compensation. Possibly. My XT30 has a mode dial on it, exposure dial on it, just like my Pen F. And Rickson has a question. Hi, for the EM10 Mark II, would you recommend the Pana 15 1.7 or the Ollie 17 1.8 for daily photos and videos? Is the only Ollie lens significantly faster? Yes. Okay, so when I tested the 15 millimeter from Panasonic, I think it is a superior lens optically for photography over the 17 or the 12 millimeter that Olympus offers. Optically, I think it's a superior lens. Although the 12 is really good. I would say the 12 millimeter and the 15 are pretty equal optically. But definitely the 15, definitely I'd give it an edge optically over those two other focal lengths. And the only difference that I could see in autofocus was in the video mode. It was significantly slower to autofocus on an EM10 Mark II. Now, when I did the testing in the camera store, I had my Pen PL8, but that is the same thing as an EM10 Mark II. So it's going to behave exactly the same. They have the same autofocus system, same TruePic sensor, same everything, right? So yeah, it was only in the video. So I would say if you're going to choose between something, a 17 and the 17-1.8, right? The 17-1.8 and a 15, and you only care about photography, I'd say go for the 15. It doesn't have the autofocus clutch like the 17 does, but if you don't use that, because the 17 has the manual focus clutch, which a lot of people like. So that's the only consideration in terms of ergonomics and workflow that you may want to consider, the 17. But optically, yeah, I think and that's a lens on my short list. I don't need it, but I do want it. So I would probably sell my 17 to get that one. But I'm pretty content with the 17. I've been mostly shooting 25 millimeter myself lately. But yeah, it's only in the video autofocus that I could tell was any difference, because it was just as fast to autofocus on everything as any Olympus lens I have. And then, do you or any others make photo books? I'm about to make another, a great way to focus around a theme and have physical tactile memory at the end of. I have not made a photo book. I would like to eventually. But I haven't, my photography is not at a point that I feel like I can put together a cohesive body of work that could tell a story. Books to me are more like for very long-term type projects where, I might say I want to do street photography in Old Town Alexandria, and then I would make a book about that. That's how I envision making a book for me. If I were to publish a book, and then the photography, the body of work would be consistent in terms of theme. And then the photography itself has to be fairly consistent in terms of quality and style, and something that, if you saw it, you would say that looks like an image that Rob took, right? So the style would have to be mine in general. And when I get to that point to where I have a consistent style, then I might start thinking about projects and say, okay, I think my style of photography would work really well with this particular subject or scene or location. And then I could put a book together. As for now, you know, I'm content with just printing a few photos and putting them in my photo books, photo albums, and that's all I can do. And then maybe that's all I need to do for now. I don't feel like I would be able to put a book together that would be, have those ingredients that I think would be a good book that I would make. That would be a book that I could publish. But definitely, it's definitely something I think about time to time. Exposure comp only works if you set your ISO to a specific value, not if you choose auto ISO. Well, you have to be in auto ISO for manual mode. Otherwise, you can't use exposure comp. Because in manual mode, shutter speed and aperture are under your control, and exposure comp only works with ISO. As far as I know. Maybe there's other workarounds where exposure comp will adjust shutter speed and you lock the ISO and the aperture, maybe. I don't know of a way to do that offhand. Again, it's not something I do because when I'm in manual, I shoot full manual, but I have to look into that. But an aperture priority, let me see. If I'm an aperture priority and I want to do exposure comp, okay, I want to take a picture. Let me just set the ISO to 800. Yeah. Okay. What if I set the ISO to 25,000? I don't see. I was at ISO 800 and at ISO 25,000. Exposure comp seems to work. Now, if I put it in auto ISO, exposure comp still works. So I don't know. I don't know what I don't know what you mean, Plato, to be honest. Serge is asking, is it possible to assign a function button to image ratio on the EM1 Mark II? I don't think so. I no longer have an EM1 Mark II. Well, my EM5 Mark III is pretty much the same thing, right? Let me see if I can do it on this. I don't think you can, though. I've never seen ratio in any of the function button things. Nope. You can't do it on an EM5 Mark III, and this is essentially the same as an EM1 Mark II, so I don't think you can. And then Bob has another recommendation for food photography, the bite shot. Well, that's cool. That's to the point, right? How about autofocus speed? I tried the 20 millimeter 1.7. It was such a pain. Oh yeah. No, autofocus speed is fine. It's fine with the 15 millimeter. I didn't have any problems. And granted, I was only in the store for about 30 minutes, right? Doing test shots around the store. But I didn't have any problems with autofocus, because when I noticed how slow the autofocus was in video with that lens, I was like, well, how is it for photography? And it was like snap, snap, snap. The 20 millimeter pancake lens, I've heard nothing but complaints about how slow the autofocus is on that lens. But I've never heard anything about the 15 millimeter lens. So if anybody here owns that lens, the 15 millimeter, maybe you can speak to how the autofocus is uh, on an Olympus camera for stills. I personally, I didn't see any problem with it when I was at the store, because that would have stuck out in my mind too, right? How slow it is in autofocus with video. I said, well, how is it in stills when I was in the store? And I didn't have any problems, but I don't own the lens and I haven't used it outside of that store experience a few years ago. Hello, John. How are you? Wow, you got your new OM. Awesome. Already got a refurb. Man. Wow, I hope you got a good deal on it. It's an awesome, awesome camera. I have no complaints. I mean, oh, you're welcome, Rick. I like the Pana 17 because I assume you mean the 15. I like the Pana 15. I assume you mean the 15 millimeter Panasonic, because I don't think they make a 17, but it's I don't think they make us. I don't know. Anyway, I think you mean the 15. Oh, but you still like to record videos with good AF speed. Use the kit lens then. Kit lens is great for video. I mean, if you need the low light capability with your video, then the kit lens is not going to work. But you don't have to worry about depth of field so much, because when you're that wide, there's not really going to be any depth of field that would be effective. You'll have a deeper depth of field with a kit lens, but you're not going to get that shallow with a 15 millimeter at 1.8 either, or 1.7. You'll get some, but not much. Is it just me, or is the video AF on the Panasonic 25 slow? I'm using the EM5 Mark II. The AF is slow on my other lenses, the 14 2.5. Okay. The AF on the 14 millimeter 2.5 for video is going to be slow, even for stills, right? You're talking about stills though, right? I'm using, you're talking about for video. It's a little bit jumpier, okay? I use the 25 millimeter a lot for my live streams. I've switched with just last week. I switched to the kit lens for the live stream. So I'm using the kit 14 to 42 lens right now. And as you can see, the focus is, I'm using the kit lens with the EM10 Mark II right now. The focus, right? I'm going to try and demonstrate the difference. So it's on my hand. Now it's on my face, right? The focus is very smooth, right? Transition. When I'm using an Olympus lens with a contrast detect camera, EM10 Mark II. The Panasonic 25 millimeter f1.7 is not as smooth. It jumps. It jumps back and forth. So if I do this on the 25 millimeter and then let go, you're going to see it kind of jump and wobble a little bit faster, right? That's what I noticed with the 25 millimeter or Panasonic lens in video with the Olympus camera. It's just jumpier. So, however, video autofocus on a phase detect camera like the EM1 Mark II, EM1 Mark III, EM5 Mark III, the video autofocus is fine, because I think the phase detect finds the target faster and more smooth than contrast detect with any lens, Panasonic or Olympus. However, with the contrast detect systems, I found the Panasonic lenses don't work quite as well in video as they do as the Olympus lenses. The Ali 62.8 Again, it's because your camera is a contrast detect, and the 60 millimeter macro lens is not made for video. Let me just look at something. If it has the MSC designation, the Olympus lens is. Let me just look at the picture of the lens. Okay, it does have that designation. So it shouldn't be slow. Let me show you what I'm talking about here. Again, it's a lens I don't own, but right here where my mouse is rolling over, you'll see the letters MSC, meaning it's movie and still compatible. So it's supposed to work well in video mode on Olympus cameras, just like my kit lens is doing right now. So I don't have an explanation for why the 60 macro is not working as well for you. From a technical standpoint, from a specification standpoint, I can't tell you why that's the case. You know, if I had to speculate, you know, a macro lens is just not made for video. It's a specialty lens, so I would imagine that the way the optics work is going to be different. It's optically designed to do something else other than video. Macro lenses are designed to focus accurately close up and be sharpest close up, like at these kinds of distances, whereas just about every other kind of lens is designed to be optically sharp at long distances or closer to infinity, and they sort of lose their sharpness as you get closer to the subject. Now, we can't perceive that with our cameras because sometimes the sensor itself can't resolve that. Sometimes the lens optically is not that sharp anyway, whether you're at infinity or close up. But from a technical standpoint, lenses are designed optically to be sharper at distances, whereas macro lenses are designed to be sharper close up. You cannot design a lens to do both. You can design the lens to be very good either way, but I think technically a lens cannot be designed to be sharp optically at distances and close up at the same time. But you can certainly design lenses to be sharper than the sensor can resolve close or far away, so you're effectively getting equal sharpness close up and at distance, but from a technical standpoint it can't be done. And I am speaking from not experience or being a lens designer. I'm just speaking from various interviews I've seen from people that design lenses. I've heard that come up. So you're hearing it third hand. That particular characteristic. Okay, so always do your own due diligence whenever you hear somebody on YouTube or anywhere tell you something. But my source is basically from interviews I've seen on YouTube from lens designers talking about lens design, that you can't do both. You have to pick one and then do the best you can. Okay. I lost my screen. Am I still live even? Yes, I'm still live. Okay. Yeah, that's cool. Casper makes a book once a year. See, he has a theme, right? That makes complete sense. Oh, that's cool. Randy made a photo book for his mom. I bet my mom would like one. She doesn't like my photography, though. I mean, she likes some images, right? But a lot of images, she's like, that's not sharp. I can't see anything. It's not clear. And I'm like, no, I'm trying to be creative. So, oh, well, that's not very creative. You know what I mean? She doesn't like my photography at all. It's kind of funny. And the zoom speed. I'm lost here. What do you mean by zoom speed? Let me back up a little bit. Maybe. You know, Michael, I'm not sure the context of this question anymore. You'll have to rephrase it for me. Sorry, I can't answer that one. And John is saying, I'm too hard on myself. A personal photo book documenting a theme or a journey adventure that you enjoyed is a great memory. I guess like a diary, but that's why I have my photo albums, you know. For me, I don't need to publish a book. If I'm going to spend money to publish a book, and they're not expensive, you know, $20, and you can get a nice photo book, but and just to be clear, I don't want exposure comp in manual mode. It is there when I switch it to manual to A or S, and I want to turn it off. Oh, no, you can't do that. That said, usually settings don't carry over like that. Let me just double check. Yeah, for some reason, exposure comp carries over from A to S to M. Yeah, I don't think there's a way to turn it off directly though, unfortunately. From our earlier conversation, I don't think there's a way to do that. And you got a brand new D780 for $1149. Pricing error, Best Buy, they honored it. Oh, interesting. And I got the 200 to 500 5.6 VR and having a lot of fun. Oh, wow. The D780, I think, was the upgrade to the D750. Did they do anything new with that, though? Let me just look at a D780. This is a, yeah, it's a 24 megapixel full frame. So you got the latest, you know, processing engine, maybe a little faster shutter speed and expandable ISO. Oh, 4K video now. I didn't have 4K video on my D750. And you got yours for about half price. Holy crap. That is pretty good. I mean, Abe's of Maine has one for $16.29. Wow, that's a kick-ass deal, man. And you know, my D750, Randy will tell you, he has it now. It's an excellent camera, so I imagine the D780 is even better. And the image quality from my D750 was, you know, just spectacular, just amazing. Although I like my new DF better. Even though it's 16 megapixel full frame, I like the images I got from my DF even a little better. Maybe it's all in my head, but any thoughts on the OM-8-25 f4? I see it's on sale for the first time. Yes, I saw that too. Seems like a great walkabout everyday lens. I think it would make a great lens for street photography, right? Because especially at very tall buildings or very narrow roads, having that wide angle gives you the option that you don't have to back up into the street to get the shot that you want, right? Because a lot of times with a 25 millimeter or 50 millimeter, anything more than 25, a lot of times you have to back up sometimes into the street to get a shot wide enough to capture the environment. So I think for street photography, it's awesome. Landscape photography would be really good too if you like to do single shot landscapes. It's really good. But being an everyday lens, I feel like 12 to 40, that range, the 12 to 45, 12 to 40 Pro, 12 to 40 f4 is a better everyday lens because you can zoom out to 40 millimeters. I don't see a need to go wider than 12 millimeters too often, other than like what I was talking about. You want to capture more in the frame and get those really interesting perspectives. Because 12 millimeters sometimes isn't wide enough, right? And you still have to back up quite a bit. And I know in the past I've wanted that lens so bad, to replace my current 7 to 14. Because I got that flaring issue, right, with the 7 to 14 for my pro work, and an 8 to 25 would all but eliminate that problem, the purple flaring specifically. But I have to think about it some more. Still, it's like $800 or $900. That lens is still a little bit pricey for me. I'd have to trade in. Some, because my problem is Christmas is coming up, and I usually spend a lot on gifts and things at Christmas. So the timing of the sale is, if it went on sale like in March or in April, I would probably get it. But when it goes on sale, things that I want for myself that go on sale, as attractive as the pricing might be, it's like I don't have the funds to buy myself something and other people. So if somebody wants to buy me an 8 to 25, this is an awesome time to buy me one. Okay. But for me to buy it for myself, it's not, the timing is a little bit rough because it's a time when I spend a lot of money and I can't be spending on myself so much. So I think if it were a different time of year, I probably would get it at this price. It's really under $1,000, whatever that is, under $1,000. Now we're in a price range that is a lot more attractive, right? And I would probably end up buying secondhand at this point because the lens has been out for a while, so there's probably some secondhand. If you don't want to buy secondhand, I think it's a good price now. Let me check eBay real quick. Let's see what they're going for. $800 used. So and brand new, it's on sale for $900. So it's only $100 difference between used and new right now. So I think it makes sense. Yeah, I think it makes sense to get one now if you want one. But yeah, as an everyday lens, I feel like I need to go over 25 millimeters sometimes. And a 12 to 40 would be a better everyday lens, I think. But an 8 to 25 is it's more of a specialty lens. If you need 8 millimeters wide, like I said, if you do a lot of street photography, then the 8 to 25 makes more sense than the 12 to 40, because rarely in street photography do you need to go more than 25 millimeters. because street photography is more about getting up close, capturing the environment, things like that. Same thing with landscape. You want to capture the whole environment. But it wouldn't be an everyday lens for me because I'm not an everyday street photography. Any chance of a photo editing such fun, and you should limit the number of entries so it's not so arduous. Yeah, I should do them again. Heck, I'll just do one. Let me look at my calendar. I think I have a photo job on Thursday. Let me look at my calendar real quick. I might as well commit to it now, because if I don't commit to it now, I'm not going to do it. I can't do it Thursday. I don't want to do it Friday. Okay, Wednesday the 16th. Let me put it in here. Photo editing live. All right. Okay, Wednesday the 16th, I'll do one. I'll try and set it up today to be live on Wednesday. So Wednesday the 16th. There. Because every week for the past 6 months, someone will ask me about doing a live photo live editing stream. And I say, okay, I'll do it. But then, if I don't set it up, I just don't get around to it. So there it is. It's on my calendar, and I'll set it up. I'll set it up after. Now I'm committed. Okay. Panasonic 20 is known to be slow focus after the updated version. It's still slower to focus, which is not great for street. Yeah. Lauren would know. I think you've had that lens before, right? Or maybe you still have it. But you switched to the 14. And I did see some of your new photos. They're really nice. I just didn't get a chance to comment on them from your email. And Robin loves the Ollie 25 over the 17 or other Panasonic. Just saying. Yes. I would say the 25 is really my favorite lens right now. It was the 17. Because of the field of view, not because of the optics. The field of view, I preferred the field of view of 17 over the 25, even though optically the 25 is better. Not that the 17 is bad. It's fine, right? But there seems to be some variation in copy samples. Some people's 17s are not as good as others, which is true for all lenses. But let's say the very best 17 optically versus the very best 25 optically, the 25 is better. Just hands down, it's a better lens. And yeah, I really like the focal length. That's the lens I take out the most. Oh, Druid, you thought MSC was multi-super coated. No, it's movie still compatible. Yeah, that was from a while ago. Oh, this is another option. Lauren bought this lens and he really likes it. So this must have been when I was talking about lenses being designed to focus close or far away. A 30 macro is designed to focus close up. So I'm getting some validation here from another user, someone with a lot of experience. Okay. Oh man, that's what I want to do eventually. I want to put pictures that I take all over my walls, just like Randy's talking about. But I have to paint my house before I do that. Because if I do it now, then I take all the pictures down. I have to patch all the holes and then repaint. I don't know. It just seems I'll get around to it eventually, but that's something I want to do too. And the 780 is a better buffer. Yeah, I'm sure everything is better about the D780. So really, Nikon makes really great cameras. And the D750 has been rated the best for astro. I can see that. I took some great astro images with my D750. Ooh, I want to show you one actually. I couldn't find my food photo, but I did find my old astro photos. Where did I put those? I was just looking at them yesterday. I had my backup drive died on me. So I didn't lose anything because it was my backup drive, but I lost all my backups. So now I'm making a new backup drive. And where are my old astro photos? I think they were in 2015. Let me see. Let's look at 2016. There's one, but that's not one I like. 2014. I don't think I had the T750 in 2014. Just so you guys can follow along with me, this is where I'm looking. I mean, I think this is my D750. NEF. What does that say? Yeah, this is my D750. So 15 seconds f2 at ISO 1100. And this was in Shenandoah, so I'll just punch in the pixel peep a little bit. So tiny bit of eggshells here, but that's one. These are not the ones that I like though. I can't find those. Another 15-second exposure. Fisheye. No, I think it's in this folder though. It's probably in this folder. Let me go to this folder. There's got to be another way to let me select all these. And so Shenandoah. Developed treat. I know there's a way to do it. Collections. There's a way to find just only images you process, because a lot of these, I need to delete a lot of this crap. but it's definitely in here. Oh, wait. I'm close. It was one of, no. This was kind of a cool shot too. But damn it, I had a bunch of them. I was just looking at them yesterday. Piece the shit out of me where they are now. I should have keyworded them so I could find them again. Oh, this trail. I gotta, damn it. I don't know. It's going to be close to this area because this one I used to go camping all the time. Oh, well. Sorry about that. I don't know where they are. I thought they were right here. Fisheye, old. But I think for like single shot astrophotography, you know, D750 is pretty awesome. I don't know about using them for like doing hundreds and thousands of pictures and stacking and all that. Maybe it's just as good, but and George has a comment. Good morning or evening. Exposure compensation in manual mode only indicates the exposure difference from the camera metered exposure. Well, okay, the EV meter at the bottom has a dual function. It can be exactly what George is talking about here. Georgios. It's exactly what he's talking about. It shows you the difference between the camera's metered exposure versus what you've dialed in manually. However, when you push the function button, if say, for example, you program the function button to be exposure compensation, when you push and hold that button down, the EV meter changes to be exposure compensation meter. So it's a dual function meter. It doesn't just serve one purpose. It serves that purpose like George is talking about, but when you push and hold, you can switch the function of that EV meter to be exposure compensation. So I don't know if I can demonstrate that. Let me just try real quick. So if I put this in manual mode, you have to put it in you have to lock the ISO. So I fixed the ISO at 200. Oh shit. All right. I'm going to demo what Georgios is talking about. All right, so right now you can see that the EV meter is blinking -3. So it's telling me that the setting, I'm more than 3 stops underexposed from the camera's, what the camera would think would be the proper exposure. And that's because I got the lens cap on. But if I push and hold the function button, oh, come on. Let me switch the lever back. I just did this for higher, didn't I? And now it's not doing it. Button function, ISO button. Oh, because I have to be in, if you're in auto ISO mode, okay, the EV meter's reading -3 EV, but if I use the, if I push and hold the frickin' button, there we go. You can see now that I can control the exposure compensation, which is going to adjust the ISO to whatever it needs to be, right? Now, because I have the lens cap on, I can't demonstrate exposure properly, but I just want to demonstrate this function. So the EV meter actually in this case is still reading -3 underexposed, and I can dial in exposure compensation manually. And if I let go, you can see that I've dialed in -2 EV, but the EV meter is blinking more than 3 stops underexposed. Let me take the lens cap off and just see what happens. Yeah, now you can see that the EV meter is telling me I'm 2 stops overexposed, but I've dialed in -2 stops exposure compensation. And if I want to achieve that -2 stops, I'm going to have to dial in the shutter speed. So I have to be at 1/250th of a second, it looks like, to be -2 EV. And if I dial this back to 0, let me just... Okay. So yeah, the EV meter is reading 0 no matter what I dial in for exposure comp. So if I take a picture here, I'll be 2 stops underexposed, whatever the EV meter is reading. Oops. Okay. I hope that makes sense. That's a very subtle difference between the two. And of course, if I put the camera back into manual ISO, now the number shows matches what the EV meter is reading, right? So if I take the lens cap off, see now the number matches the EV meter. So if I lower my shutter speed, so at 1/200th of a second, I can get a normal exposure at this point. But I can only do that if I'm in manual ISO. If I'm in auto ISO, then that number represents exposure compensation. Okay. But that is an important difference. And HE bought the 8-25. It's on sale for $10.99. Wow. Yeah, prices have gone up though, right? Oh, Mark Wolf got a D600. D600 is pretty much the same thing, right, as a D750. They just had that oil spot problem, if I recall correctly. But if you clean your sensor every once in a while, it's really almost as good as a D750 in every way. It's just a different build. I don't think it has that same tilt screen and all that. I can't remember. It's been so long. And I'll need the 45 or longer for street if 3-hanger women are still haunting your streets. I'm trying to think if I've had any incidents lately. I don't think I did. I had a couple of people ask me why I'm taking pictures, but no one's been angry, right? They just ask me what I'm doing. I said I'm just taking pictures, street photography. Oh, okay. So when they ask me, I guess I don't know why, because I was using at that time I was using my OM-1 on a tripod, so I looked a little more professional. Maybe that's why they were asking. Versus, I bet if I was just hanging my Pen F off my neck, nobody would have even approached me about it. But when you got your full-on gear and tripod, somebody might be a little curious. So I think they were asking out of curiosity. Yeah, I think the 2017 is fine. It's definitely a fun little pancake lens. Just wait for it to finish autofocusing, which is like a split second, right? It's not that much slower. I mean, it is relative to what fast autofocus is. Like if you can focus within 1/1000th of a second with an Olympus lens, and you focus within 1/10 of a second with a Panasonic 20 millimeter, perceptually there's not much difference, right? Although there's a little. Is it possible? Oh, I answered this. So I need to get way down. So Michael had asked me something. I guess I answered it because he said thanks. Okay. Oh, the D780 has the guts of the Z6. Okay. That makes sense because the Z6 came out before the Z780, right? And Jose is in the house now. Wow, I need to wrap this up here. Last say taken off. Okay. Yeah, and Sam is just reminding us that you can convert cameras to Astro. You take away the eye or cut filter, and like he was saying, you can add specific frequency filters as well. That's if you're like an astrophotographer lifer. If you're going to just be doing it forever, maybe then. And Mark Wolf says, I don't recommend. Oh, so yeah. So he's confirming the oil spots. They can't be removed anymore. I hate them professionally cleaned. I have them professionally cleaned twice and still something remains. And you don't mind them. Yeah, I guess. I mean, you really probably only gonna see them when you're shooting at wider apertures anyway, right? And maybe a little bit in clear skies and things like that. But everyday photography, they'd have to be pretty rough to really see them. And Tony says, how's it going? Still learning my OM-1. Yeah, me too. I've only been taking my OM-1 out for my paid work, not so much for personal stuff. So I don't know. It's it just doesn't feel like I mean, I need to take it. It doesn't feel like a street camera or camera that I would take on a photo walk, but definitely for birding, sports action, wildlife, that's the camera to take. The Pen F, definitely not. Man, well, you saw the eagle pictures at the beginning of the stream. They sucked, right? But okay, I think I'll wrap it up here. So you guys have a great rest of your weekend. I'm going to eat something, and then I'll set up this live editing stream for Wednesday, so we can do some photo editing. And other than that, take lots of pictures. Be sure and share them with me on your Instagram. Just tag me at Rob Trek Lens so I can see them. And because I follow a lot of people, and the things that show up on my feed are just the same usual suspects, which I enjoy. But a lot of you shoot some interesting images, and I don't see them because I have to scroll forever. So just tag me if you want me to see a specific picture. Don't tag me in everything, okay? I'm not. I don't need to see everything. Just tag me some of your more interesting ones. I'd love to see them. Or in Flickr, just I have a group on Flickr community, so you can go there and post your images. I check those out quite often as well. So thanks again for being here with me. I really enjoyed having all of you. And I will see some of you back on Wednesday and hopefully all of you again on Sunday next week.